All right, when we talk about classic planters, and we've got our 3600 model here, common question, how much horsepower does it take to pull a classic planter?
Yeah, so generally Kinze manufacturing is going to recommend anywhere from 7 to 10 horsepower per row. Once we start adding different features, whether that be hydraulic requirements or physical ground engaging components such as fertilizer openers, no-till coulters, we will see the extra need for horsepower. But generally 7 to 10 horsepower is what Kinze's going to recommend per row.
All right, very good. Now, other tractor requirements, you mentioned hydraulics. What are our hydraulic requirements for classic planters?
So typically with a classic planter, we're always going to have 2 remotes. It's going to be our primary raise and lower and fold function remotes, which would be our red and blue sets. That's going to put us right about 15 gallons per minute.
Okay. Now, this planter happens to have a number of extra hoses on it. So this case, it's an older machine. The red hoses for our primary lift are faded a little bit. They're more of a pink, I guess I'd call that.
Yeah.
The second function, or our auxiliary function, that is our folding and our markers, are the blue hoses. We've got a couple extra sets of hoses going on here. What else do we have here, Brandon?
Yeah, so this planter specifically is equipped with a hydraulic drive as well as a vac fan. So we have another set of remotes here for a hydraulic drive and our vac fan, like I mentioned. But once we get to that vac fan, I will note we do need a zero pressure return case drain line as well.
Okay, so classic planters, as we said before, can be chain-driven meters. It doesn't mean that we can't have the other features like vacuum seed metering or hydraulic drive. So be aware of what we're getting at and make sure that our tractor configuration has enough remotes and enough flow to make sure that the planter performs appropriately. So horsepower and hydraulic capacity. All right, let's get this planter hooked up and we can make sure that we've got the tractor that'll work for us.
All right. Yep. So I'm going to start here, guys, with our primary red hoses. Like Phil mentioned, these are a little weathered. So these are our pink-white color like we described earlier. I'm going to put those into our first remote here. All right, so we have our main raise and lower remotes connected. Like Phil mentioned, we then move on to our blue remotes here, or our fold auxiliary functions. I'm going to put those into our second remote.
And I will mention, guys, that as we connect these, it's truly operator preference as far as which remote. For most of us, that number one primary is always going to be our raise and lower, but our fold or auxiliary function could be shifted depending upon your desire for cab controls.
All right, the next set of remotes here are going to be for hydraulic drive. So I'm going to put those into our third remote here. All right, and our last set of remotes is going to be for our vacuum. Let me pull these out here quick. Like we mentioned before, guys, we are going to see our zero pressure case drain return line here.
You'll notice it's a different hydraulic tip. It has this profile for the Pioneer coupler, but the end of it, rather than having a ball type relief, is going to be what a lot of guys refer to as a shower head. Guys, this is a specialty return tip that, number one, is checked to not allow pressure to return, but also is relieved in case it comes out. It will allow oil to flow through without damaging any components on the planter. Yep.
So I'm going to connect my regular connection up into our last remote here, and then I'm going to put our zero pressure case return line into our zero pressure return port on the tractor.
So this is how you connect the classic planter. Primary red hoses, raise and lower. Second function, auxiliary, for fold and marker use in the field. For this particular planter, we have a hydraulic drive, and then we also have a fan for the vacuum system. Brandon, classic planters, not only their hydraulic requirements from a tractor side, but we also have electrical requirements. First, never forget safety. The standard 7-pin safety light connection on all of Kinze planters to make sure that we have the safety warning flashers and turn signals going down the road.
Yep.
So we've got that one there.
So go ahead and plug this in for us.
And while you're getting that one, our second electrical requirement on this particular 3600 is also the folding control box. Now, the smaller non-folding planters, we'd be done by now. Anything that lifts and rotates, the 3600 we have here is going to have a folding control box to allow the fold functions from the cab. So we've got the cab box already installed. The harness is sticking out the back side of the cab here, so we're going to be able to reach up and get this connected. So Brandon, classic planter connection is done. We've got the right tractor horsepower.
Yep.
We've got hydraulic capacity that we need. We've got hydraulic connections made. We've got the electrical connections made. So sometimes they call these a hitch pin planter. We've got a hitch pin in this, but there's frame checks to do to make sure that the planter is going to operate correctly in the field. So hitch being level. We talk about hitch being level from front to back, and it's important to do that with the tractor, and oftentimes nice hard floor, field conditions, but effectively the level toolbar operation is going to keep that row unit running level in the field as well. A drawbar that's 13 to 17 inches in height is going to give us enough range that we have adjustment in the hitch clevis itself. So as we look at the hitch clevis, a number of holes that allow us to change that height. We also want to remember that that hitch clevis can actually be inverted. So these older cast clevises are multi-directional. We can flip it over. We actually get half a hole differential if we're trying to fine-tune that hitch height. But level from front to back is pretty important. And 3600 like we've got here is actually a really good way to be able to step back and look at it. If we look at that first stage of that marker, it's going to be standing straight up in the air. Okay, that's going to tell us that the hitch is where it needs to be. So not just level front to back, but we want to look side to side and make sure that that planter's setting down level. We have a toolbar height. And we talk about toolbar height, we're going to be talking about the distance between the bottom of the toolbar and the planting surface. And that's a specific measurement.
It is. Yep. So for the 3600 here, for example, guys, we're going to be looking in that 20 to 22 inches range, and that'll be from the ground to the bottom of our main frame here. So
why is that important?
Yeah. So that number is important. That way, as we're traveling across the field, guys, we're getting that smooth movement with our row units. Our parallel arms are parallel with the ground. That's going to be optimal for max row unit travel if we start going over little portions of hills and dips. That way we're maintaining that solid and consistent seed depth as we travel across our field.
So one of the things we will also want to mention, if we need to change this, there are wheel hole positions on the transport tires and the field wheels to allow some adjustability. Most of the times the adjustments coming straight out of the factory for these wheels are going to be sufficient, but always double check that toolbar height from the bottom of the toolbar down to your planting surface, and visually you'll see it with those parallel arms on the row unit. And that's really going to be the basics of connecting a classic planter up to your tractor. With those, we're going to move on and we're going to look at another segment down the road, and we're going to, I think you drove us right into it with the row units. We're going to start taking a look at row units and the important wear characteristics of those as well. So thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you.